I could keep rambling on for the next 2 hours about this stuff, and I'm sure you don't want to listen to me ramble on. So if you've got any questions, anything that I wasn't clear enough on, or if there's something that you vehemently disagree with, please, let's hear it.
Let's again just use the mic and go one at a time, please, so they can be responded to adequately.
Thank you. My name's Edie Ayler, and I live in Crawford County in Wisconsin, across the river from Iowa. And I have a question for you on the statistics that support that the smaller local companies are somehow more advantageous. And where I'm coming from is that we have a small company across the way in Iowa, and those folks that support them a lot. But it seems to us that at the same time, when there are people who don't support them, that the intimidation factor can be more harsh because of that, because it is a small community. And they have a lot of safety violations and such. So I'm just curious about the statistics, and were you just talking economics, and if you have a comment on it. Thank you.
Sure. It's purely economics. It's
okay.
Purely, and that doesn't mean that you could have a small local company that's actually a bad company. Mm-hmm. And a large company coming in from Texas that's actually a good corporate citizen. Okay? But purely from a theoretical perspective, that local company should be preferred over the bigger company.
Is there some statistics on that shows the local companies are doing a better job?
The only experience that we've got is badger mining.
So it's just the one you've looked at. Okay, thank you.
Oh, it couldn't have been that bad.
It was very good. Thank you for showing up.
Thank you.
Brian Lavelle, Blackhammer Township, West Spring Grove. Can you address the decrease in property values? Is that part of your bailiwick?
Yeah, that is something that we're trying to look at. There is some evidence. The problem that I've got is that the property value impacts depend on proximity to the mine. And more importantly, proximity to the roads that the mining companies are using to transport on. If if I've got a nice house, right, that's sitting right next door to a mine, my front driveway empties onto the main road that they're using, the impact on the property values there will be fundamentally different than that exact same house located 2 miles away that's in the opposite direction. Okay? That second property, there could be no impact on property values at all. So it depends very specifically on where the piece of property is located. So there's no clean answer to that. There is the argument, though, because people don't want to live next to these things, you won't see the property values increasing to the extent that you would expect. Okay? There's some evidence of it decreasing because people don't want to live next to these things, but you're not going to see a property value increase because of the economic activity associated with these things. How's that for a good non-answer?
Well, so on that same topic of property values decreasing, what have you seen communities do to mitigate the fact that a mine opening next door is going to decrease the next door neighbor's property value by up to 30%. What have you seen other communities do to mitigate that?
Nothing. Okay. Not that I haven't seen it. I don't think they've been doing anything to mitigate that. It's just too bad.
And do you have any ideas on what might be done to mitigate that?
Hire a very good lawyer and sue the mining company.
Really? Sue the mining company?
If I owned my retirement destination, my migration, amenity migration, beautiful farmette, and I'm perfectly content, and my neighbor sold out to a mining company and I got trucks driving up and down, of course I'm going to sue. Whether I win or not, it depends on state law.
I guess one of the reasons I ask is because I've heard of a community, the town of Howard in Wisconsin, up in kind of, I want to say it's in Eau Claire, Chippewa. I believe what they did was they put a mining agreement in place where the mining company would have to offer to buy adjoining or adjacent properties. Is that what?
And build a buffer around it.
And build a buffer?
And build a buffer around it.
Okay.
So essentially, if I whiteboard, is you got your mind here, you say, I'm going to buy all the properties around it, and then I'm just going to leave those properties alone. So you're building a buffer. I have not seen any communities that have done that, but that's a possibility. That's a possibility. It could also be that, you know, for the mining company to simply say, look, we're going to really devastate your property values. We don't want to be a bad neighbor. We'll buy you out. And that's a possibility.
Thank you.
I was wondering if you've done any studies on small towns with transloading facilities in a small town. I'm from Wabasha, Minnesota. Live north of here. We're going to have Superior Sands out of Alberta, Canada coming 280 trucks a day, 5 days a week, 24/7 during that 5-day span. We now have that was approved. The CUP was approved without an environmental assessment worksheet. City Planning Commission felt we did not need that. The CUP was good enough. We now have a second hauler in line, 150 trucks, Monday through Saturday. That'll be 300 total. So we're gonna have diesel, we're gonna have trucks going through the west end of Wabasha. Any studies on what that does?
The best thing that I can describe related to the truck traffic is that there's been a number of studies that have looked at highway bypasses. Okay, go with me for a minute here. Is that a lot of communities, rural communities, the main highway goes right through the smack center of town. Okay, and then the DOT will come in and say, because of traffic flows in this area, we're going to build a bypass. Do you think that's a good idea for that community or a bad idea?
It's impossible in one country.
Our town, it would be good.
It's a good idea. It's a good idea. And why do you think it's a good idea? Because you're taking a lot of traffic and noise and dust and semi-trucks out of your downtown community. It actually turns out to be good. The ones that lose are businesses that are dependent upon high volume traffic. You will see, like if there's a gas station or fast food restaurants that are downtown and bypass comes through, they will move out to the bypass. Okay, but generally, now if you take that logic and work it in reverse, I'd say that it's not good for the community. Unless the layout of the community, I don't know the community, if the layout of the community is that you've got your downtown and then this is like an industrial park sitting off on the side, if that's the case, then there'll be little impact. If the truck traffic is going through the center of town, it's not good.
What it will do, it'll come over the Mississippi, over a bridge from Nelson, Wisconsin to Wabasha, then hang a right, hang a quick left, so we'll kind of go by the ball field where the kids play. There's a nice little slough with some ducks. Then go up over another bridge, and the area where it will end up is zoned industrial. Canadian Pacific owns it. We were told, actually the city attorney told the City Planning Commission, this is federal jurisdiction, there's really nothing you can do about it, and basically they listen to that.
You get into, see, I'm not a zoning lawyer,
Yeah.
so I can't really
Yeah.
input from an economic perspective.
Right.
You don't want that kind of truck traffic going through your residential area. You don't want that kind of truck traffic going through your commercial downtown area. You just don't want it. You want it, if it's off on the side of town, fine, keep it over there. But you do not want it going through residential or downtown.
Wabasha relies heavily on tourism. The City Planning Commission knew this. People got up and spoke at 2 different public hearings. Basically, my gist of it is they want their cake and they want to eat it too. We won't allow hauling on the weekends now, so the tourists won't see it. But those of us that live here will.
Yeah.
I
Well, there was one, and we were shocked, is that there was a proposed processing plant to be set up across the street from a high school, a combined grade school, high school, just south of Alma in Buffalo County. And people were taking bets that they were going to approve that. Why? Jobs. Period. They turned it down. And it was like, wow. But to set it up right across the street from the high school? Put it 2 miles down the road. Put it 3 miles down the road.
Thank you.
Have you done any studies regarding the increase or decrease in taxes to the various counties or the sand mines?
No, and the reason we haven't is because it's not really clear in Wisconsin what the tax law is going to be. The way it's looking right now is that they're going to be taxed as a gravel pit, which means that there's like no value there. So the value is going to be on the improvements that are built on it. Now, the way the Wisconsin law operates is that machinery is not taxable. The building is taxable, but not the machinery. So it looks as though the property taxes that are going to be flowing off in these mines are going to be really small, unless you have on-site facilities, okay? Now, it gets so tricky that there was one sand mine that they built a scaffolding around a piece of equipment, right? And it looks like it's a four-sided building that they just left open, right? If it's a four-sided building that they left open, then that is taxable, but not the piece of equipment. If that scaffolding is there to hold that piece of equipment in place, then it's not taxable. So it's a big question mark in terms of how the property taxes are going to play out on this. So the real impact is going to be on transportation and the roads. And that's where the mining companies really should be expected to pay into a transportation fund.
I guess what I'm looking for is a little speculation on this one. Given the fact that the sand industry is a boom and bust industry, and the oil and gas extraction industry, which it relies on, is a boom and bust industry, is there like an exponential factor between the two that makes it more likely that the sand industry will go bust first?
No, they work in tandem.
So there's no correlation that makes one worse than the other?
No, they work in tandem.
When the companies come into the communities, they put their mines outside of town. More speculation here, I guess. What business sectors of the community benefit the most?
You would expect, because you're generating jobs, that the bulk of the impact is going to be on people spending their money in the local community. You would expect to see it in terms of retail development, personal service development, things like that. But that's where you don't see the spin-off because of the instability. You don't see restaurants popping up because of the instability of the industry. You don't see retail stores popping up because of the instability. So the spin-off is really very, very nebulous. It's very difficult to pin it down because of the nature of the industry. It's going to depend also in terms of how the company operates. If the company is fairly large and it brings in its own trucking company, it brings in its own mechanics, it brings in its own engineers, then that's going to have a different kind of impact than a company that says, okay, we're going to contract with a local trucking company. We're going to contract with a local truck maintenance company. We're going to contract with, So each company is going to be operating differently. And how that impacts is going to be on a case-by-case basis.
Your correlation studies seem to indicate that there was higher employment in the mining companies in general and that this was at a higher economic status, but at the same time you showed that there was more reports of a decreased health status. Did you do any economics in terms of what is the overall picture then economically if you look at what are the hospital bills doing in relation to the income that's being looked at?
No, I did not.
Rick Zarwell with Alma-Key County Protectors just south of here. Could you speak about road taxes and recovering funds at the county level or state level from the tonnage hauled by the mining companies?
This is negotiated. Again, I'm not familiar with Minnesota law, but in Wisconsin, this is a pure negotiation between the local highway department, whether it's the county or the town, and it varies by county. And it's a pure negotiation. It's saying that for us to give you a conditional use permit, which is basically our approval for you to do this, you have to agree to this, this, and this. And then it goes into the negotiation. Now, this is where a lot of Wisconsin communities have really run into problems, is because they've never experienced anything like this before. They don't know that you can say, we want you to put in X thousands of dollars into a highway trust fund. We want you to put in X thousands of dollars into a reclamation fund in case you go bankrupt and we're stuck cleaning it up. They're not used to doing those kinds of negotiations. They're not sure what they can legally ask for. So I sarcastically said in one meeting, ask for $1 million.
Yeah, we intend to. Yeah.
You know, it's like, ask for the moon and then negotiate.
We will. Then how about the state? Does the state laws override the county in those cases then?
Yes. State law always supersedes local.
Okay.
So
even if it's a county road?
So, yeah, so if the state comes in and the state says, we will not allow you to do this, you can't do it.
Okay. Another question on tourism. You mentioned the multiplier a little while ago, 1.2 jobs in rural areas, multiplier one mine job to 1.2 other jobs. Do you know the multiplier?
0.2 other jobs.
Pardon me?
0.2 other jobs. So if you generate...
Oh, it wasn't even 1.2, it was 0.2.
One point. This is a very northern, very remote rural area.
Right.
For western Wisconsin, we did it for Buffalo County. The multiplier was like 1.4, which means that if you have a mine that generates 10 jobs, there'll be an additional 4 jobs through the multiplier effect. So a total of 14 jobs generated.
Yeah. Do you have a multiplier effect for tourism? Dollars brought into a rural county from tourism?
Again, it's going to vary. Depends on the county. I mean, the multipliers for the Twin Cities is going to be a lot bigger than the multiplier for here, for La Crosse. It's going to vary. It depends on the ownership structure, but you're generally looking at 1.3, 1.4, 1.5 for a rural county.
In Iowa, just something I learned 3 days ago, and Almakeek County is a lot like Houston County here. We found out that in Almakeek County, the income per capita is higher than any other county in the state. The tourism brings in more money per county, per capita, than the income from any other part of the state.
There are some.
And I think Houston County is similar.
You get into northern Wisconsin, it's the same thing with northern Minnesota. You think of northern Minnesota as a retirement destination? It is. There are people retiring to northern Minnesota. There are people retiring to northern Wisconsin. Why? It's the lakefront property. Well, you spend 9 months out of the year, and then you spend the dead of the winter someplace else.
Yeah.
Well, it's a different type of tourism. It's a different type of amenity migration. It's a different way of thinking about it.
Harvey from Harmony. I'm just wondering, you know, mining is kind of a boom and bust industry, and I've read a couple of articles about the possibility of artificial sand being made, and this could really throw a wrench in everybody's operation if that got going big time in the near future. You'd have open mine, you'd have people moving out, and I think it could be a disastrous thing. I don't know how long, when this is coming, I don't know what your information is on this.
I may not have been in the exact same article, but I read a couple pieces that they're trying to develop engineered sand to replace this stuff. And they said, forget it, we'll just go into an urban area and manufacture the stuff that we need. We won't have to dig it up. So it could be 5 years from now, we look back, 5 years, 10 years, who knows. Look back and say,
so if it came within 5 years, it would be a kind of a disaster situation for the mines around here.
Yes.
I think a lot of what, Bruce Chemical from Caledonia. I think a lot of what we've been discussing these specific points about roads and health and all that sort of stuff. What they really aggregate to is what's called a moral hazard, whereby the company that's taking the risk of developing a mine is going to pass the costs associated with doing the operation on someone else. Do you have any longitudinal studies in mind that would point to what happens to a mine that's closed 20 years ago and the kinds of costs that the local community is left holding the bag?
It depends on it depends on the type of mine it was. Was it an open pit mine? Was it a deep shaft mine? It depends on what the reclamation plans were.
Right.
You go into central Illinois and southern Illinois, and some of the prettiest county parks are former mines because they went into the reclaiming, and they turned into very attractive parks. But that was a planned process. But this idea of moral hazard, what that essentially is, that's a phrase economists use when you can do something and not incur a cost to do it. Okay? The example here is the mining company goes, we can run our trucks over these roads and rip up the roads, and we don't have to worry about it. Okay? We can pass the cost on to the taxpayer. And that's where a lot of, that's why, working with a reputable company, because a reputable company, a good corporate citizen type company, will not want to do that. They will want to pay their fair share. So companies, it is a potential that you'll have some companies, particularly fly-by-night companies, that are coming in for a quick buck, and they will, yeah, you don't want to deal with, you don't want those coming down. That's why you want to work with reputable companies, preferably local reputable companies.
So how does Houston County avoid a moral hazard?
You set up a trust fund. You set up a highway trust fund. You set up a reclamation trust fund. And the way that I've also seen with some of the bigger mining companies is they set up an economic development trust fund. When the Crandon mine in northern Wisconsin was being talked about, they were talking about, okay, mining company, you're going to do three things. You're going to put in a highway trust fund of X $100,000 a year, and that's going to be like a surtax, if you will. You're going to put in a couple of $1 million into a trust fund in case you go bankrupt and we have to come in and clean up your mess. If you shut the mine down and you reclaim it all to standard and that money's sitting there, we will give you the money back. They also said, we want you to fund an economic development officer so that we can, in essence, try to build on the mining operating and diversify so that when the mine does shut down, we won't be as negatively impacted. And that's what they were negotiating, and the company seemed to be very amenable to that until they sold out and pulled the plug out.
Good for them up in Crandon.
Do you know how that turned out?
What's that?
Do you know how that turned out? It was a lumber company came in and bought the mining rights. And you thought, why would a lumber company be buying the rights for a deep shaft mine? Well, it turns out that the people that were bankrolling it were the Native American tribes. The lumber company was a front. The lumber company came in and said, we will selectively harvest the woods, right, using sustainable practices. The tribe owns the land and all the mineral rights, and that will never be mined.
I don't want to monopolize this, but one more thing. You're talking about things we can see in terms of a moral hazard. I'm referring to the things you don't see. How are you going to force a mine operation to replace an aquifer?
How many of you remember when Donald Rumsfeld was Secretary of Defense and he made that comment, we know what we know, we know what we don't know what we don't know. And everybody thought, what the hell are you talking about? Right? Well, actually what he's talking about is certainty, risk, and uncertainty. Certainly, we know for a fact this is going to happen. We don't know for sure, but we can make a very good educated guess. And then the third one is, happens. Okay? You can't plan for the third one. Okay? No matter what you do, that third one's going to happen, and you're not going to see it coming.
I want to thank the person who talked about the threats and intimidation, and thank you, Rick Sarwell, for talking about the benefits that tourism bring to a pristine and beautiful area. One of the things that people say who are promoting frac sand mining is that, well, these people will be able to send their kids to college. But that's the frac sand mine owner can send his or her kids to college, but the 3 or 4 or 5 neighbors in the vicinity, because their property values dropped 30%, or as you said, no one wants to live there, so they might drop 100%. If no one wants to buy your property, it's dropped 100%. So there will be 4 or 5 families for every mine owner who will no longer be able to send their kids to college.
And this is where notions of private property rights come into play. Because there's no right or wrong answer on your philosophies on private property rights. I mean, if I'm a farmer and I'm sitting on a farm that's maybe earning me poverty wages and maybe worth $500,000 if I try to sell it as a farm, and I get somebody coming in willing to pay me $3 million for it, who are you to tell me I can't do that? And this is the fight that's occurring in western Wisconsin, is that you're getting some real private property rights folks versus, you can, and there's no right answer to that. We blame Michelle Bachmann. She's spilling over into western Wisconsin. It's like, no, keep her, please. But it's a political philosophy that is perfectly legitimate.
Could I just say that I think that both sides can use private property rights? Both sides.
Yes.
It's not just one.
Okay, I think we've gone 15 minutes over what we originally said. Just a couple of things. Reminder for people who would like to extend the moratorium, please sign the petitions on your way out. And again, I think we would all agree that Dr. Stephen Deller has done an excellent job of giving us a balanced approach of things. And I would like to very much thank him for coming and doing this.
If I could leave you with one thing, right? Just from, rather than going to town meetings and county board meetings and going no, 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 go and say these are the conditions that we could find this acceptable. Because then that's something that you can negotiate on. But if you just simply go and say no, 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 or yes, 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 then there's no place to negotiate from.